Hi everyone, I'm here today to do my November wrap-up. If you remember last month in October, I had a really slumpy month. I just had trouble reading and didn't finish a lot of books. I'm glad to say that November things have really turned around. I had an amazing reading month. I read a total of 7 books, and that is 7 novels, not including any graphic novels, which is quite a record for me for a month. And I don't know, I enjoyed everything I was reading. I have so many books to recommend for you today, so I should just jump right in. Now, the first book that I finished this month was A Feast for Crows by R.R.Martin. Since this is the 4th book in the Song of Ice and Fire series, I'm not going to say too much about it. I did find the middle section to be honestly very slow, and I was missing a lot of my favorite characters who are going to show up in A Dance with Dragons. So I only ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. Still enjoyed the series, and I'm really looking forward to getting into the last published book. So hopefully do that in the next couple months. Now, the next book I read was A Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslye Walton. This book was recommended to me by Read Susie Read as part of my BookTube Recommends project. And honestly, if she hadn't recommended it to me, I probably would have never picked it up. Just by the synopsis, it didn't sound like my kind of book. But boy, was I ever surprised. So thank you so much for Susie for recommending this to me. This is definitely exactly why I want to do this BookTube Recommends project, because it's pushing me to read books that I wouldn't necessarily order from the library, pick off the shelf. Now, in case you don't know, this book is about a girl who was born with wings. It is a bit of a magical realism story. The synopsis doesn't really describe the story particularly well. A good part of the story actually goes through Ava's genealogy, starting with her grandmother and then talking about her mother growing up and finally her own story. The writing in the story is absolutely beautiful. I'm not someone who always appreciates good writing, but the writing is as good as everyone said it was going to be. It was beautiful, beautiful prose, very impressed. This is actually Leslye Walton's debut novel, and I will definitely be keeping an eye out for whatever she writes next. As well, this book was described as young adult for me, so when I went into this book, I certainly had particular expectations. I expected to be very underdeveloped characters, very fast narrative, and it was completely the opposite. I found the characters to be very well drawn. It is somewhat of a slower story. There isn't a lot of action, and so personally, if I were the marketers for this book, I would have actually marketed this as adult fiction rather than young adult. So I think even if you don't normally like young adult, I would definitely recommend this one, because I think readers of adult fiction might actually enjoy this book even more than the young adult audience that it's targeted towards. So very impressed by this one. It was surprisingly raw and just emotional. I didn't expect to get quite as teary-eyed as I did reading it, but it was just such a beautiful story. Without saying too much in terms of spoilers, be aware that there is some adult content in this book, which again really surprised me. I did not expect such a deep, gritty underlying story to this, but very well done. Highly recommend, gave it a full 4 stars and just loved it. Now, after that, I read The Beautiful Mystery by Louise Penny. This is a cozy mystery that takes place in a monastery. It is a reclusive monastery, and so when one of the monks is found murdered, they know that it is one of the other monks who must have done it. And so it just is a great setup for a closed door mystery, and very well done. It's part of the larger Inspector Gamache mystery series. This book is actually number 8. I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting with this book just because it does spoil a lot of the previous events in the last 7 books. So personally, I'm planning on starting back with the first book, Still Life, after this, and working my way through the series. But The Beautiful Mystery was really enjoyable. I typically read a lot more thriller, gritty mysteries, so this was quite a change of pace for me, but I found myself really enjoying it. It was the perfect book to read on a cold winter night. Very much I understand why they use the word cozy. It was just a cozy book to read, honestly. Very enjoyable. It kept me guessing all the way through. I enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed the backstory to the characters. And if you are someone who enjoys kind of a well-written mystery without a lot of danger, this is a really good place to start. Now, after that, I read The Walled City by Groanin. And I received this book for free from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. So just as a disclaimer there, this is a book that takes place in a fictional city which is meant to mirror a real city that existed within Hong Kong that had walls and was basically controlled by gangs and thieves. Now this book is told from 3 different perspectives, and each one has their own motivations and secrets to tell, and I found all 3 perspectives to be equally engaging. And because the story was told with these changing perspectives in very short chapters, I found the book to be such a page turner. I always wanted to know what was happening next. It was exciting, it was fun. Now I probably only recommend this book to people who normally read YA, just because it did kind of fit into a lot of the YA tropes. There isn't some insta love going on, as well as the characters aren't incredibly well developed. It's much more focused on a fast-paced narrative. That being said, it was exactly the book I needed getting out of a slumpy October. This was just fast-paced, exciting, and fun. As well, this book really made me want to learn more about the real city that existed in Hong Kong. That would probably be my only wish, is that I wish the book had spent more time on world building, and so we got to see more of the city itself. But that being said, I enjoyed what I read. It was fun, and definitely if you're looking for that fast-paced story, this is a great one to try out. After that, I listened to Unbroken, a World War II story of survival, resilience, and redemption. This was written by Laura Hillenbrand and told the story of Louise. This was an incredible memoir. It was a true story of an Olympic champion who ended up in World War II and was captured as a POW in Japan. Just a powerful story. It's one of these stories that is so much more incredible because you know that it's actually true, that the story actually happened. I listened to this as an audiobook, and the narrator was fantastic. I believe the narrator was Rory Gilmore's grandfather, if you watch Gilmore Girls at all, and I really enjoyed that, but just very well done. It was a powerful story, definitely one that's going to stick with me for quite some time. Personally, I wish that the story had been a little more focused on Louise, just because there's a lot of side characters and side stories that Laura decided to tell within this larger story. And I would have preferred a more focused story, just because I started to get some of the side stories confused on whose mother was who, and the names of the other soldiers just kind of started to blend together for me. But sure, particularly if you had read the book as opposed to listen to it, this may not have been an issue, but still really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it to anyone who enjoys those powerful, true life stories. It's just as incredible as everyone is saying it is. And I know the movie's coming out next month. It looks really good, so I might be watching that. After that, I finished The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon, and I have to recommend that more people read this. This came out this year in 2014, and I feel like it did not get enough hype around it. It's almost a hard story to describe without spoiling too much, but it takes place over 2 time frames. In the early 1900s, there was a couple who had trouble conceiving, and they finally were able to have a daughter. In this time period, it's known that there's a way to possibly bring dead people back to life, not in a creepy zombie way, but a way for them to just live normally, but for a short period of time. And the story starts there. It's told in a couple of different diary perspectives, and it's just so gripping. I was completely pulled into this story. It was creepy and disturbing and so compelling. I don't read a lot of horror, so if you read tons of horror books, this might be kind of mild for you, but if you want that kind of creepy story, particularly to read in winter, I read this during snowstorms. It was dark and terrible outside, and this was just perfect because it takes place in this small town, I think out in somewhere in Vermont, and it's just a perfect wintry, dark, creepy story. The other perspective takes place in the modern day. A girl named Ruthie and her younger sister are looking for their mother, who has mysteriously disappeared. It of course ties back into the older story. Just love this one, love this one. Now the last book I want to talk about is Black Like Me by Ron Howard Griffin. As you can tell, this book is a lot older than the other ones I'm talking about today. This is a book about a man who dyed his skin black back in the 1960s and went around the deep south in the United States to get a perspective of what it was like to be an African American back then. Of course, there is criticism of this book that it's not the same as getting perspective from someone who actually is African American, but as a Caucasian person myself, I think it definitely helps to bridge that gap and really come from a place of understanding. The author himself was, I found, very intelligent in his writing and really tried to be unbiased and give a fair perspective, both the good and the bad, in his experiences meeting with both fellow African American people as well as meeting with the Caucasian people in the area, and I just found it very well written. I found myself just wanting to bookmark different quotes and passages throughout this, and overall just incredibly impressed by the story. Gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, very impressed, and would definitely recommend this to other people. So those are the 7 books that I read in November. It was a phenomenal month. I definitely encourage all of you to pick up any of the books I mentioned that sound like they'd be up your alley. It was a really good reading month. I don't know, I was impressed by everything I was reading. Just really enjoyable reads all around. I will be doing a December TBR. I've been ordering books like crazy from the library and can't wait to show you what I plan to read. It's probably going to be pretty ambitious, but I'm very excited for everything coming up, so watch for that video soon. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Thanks everyone. Have a good one. Okay, bye.